Good afternoon. Today I am going to speak on some major plays of Shakespeare. Mainly, I would like to begin my discussion with Hamlet. Hamlet is considered to be one of the greatest tragedies in world literature, and of course, this play is also looked at as the pinnacle of Shakespeare's creation. It is said, he started writing Hamlet in 1599, just the year when his company, Lord Chamberlain's men, shifted their venue from the northern side of the Thames to the southern side, and they then built their own theatre house known as the famous Globe Theatre House. And in the year 1599, he wrote the first tragedy of his life, Julius Caesar, a complete tragedy, and it was soon followed by Hamlet. But Hamlet didn't finish until 601, and some critics debate that it might have ended by the year 1602. Whatever it is, Hamlet appears in Shakespeare's dramatic career just at the middle point of his career, when he was reaching the apex of his career. At that time, Hamlet was produced. Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, is a sublime tragedy, because here Shakespeare categorically treats the theme of revenge. Therefore, Hamlet is known as a revenge tragedy, but it is more than that, because the many other considerations touching upon the basic issues of life also enrich this play. That is why sometimes it is difficult to put Hamlet just in the confined category of being a revenge tragedy. Actually, the French critic René Girard finally said that Hamlet is not a revenge tragedy, but a tragedy against revenge. We will explain this, how this critical comment can be accommodated in the studies of Hamlet. In my own view, it is a wonderful play, because here the young Prince of Denmark, who returns home to Denmark from his study place at the University of Wittenberg in Germany, being informed that his father died. But then, after coming to Denmark, then the message reaches him that the security guards watching over the boundary wall of the Palace of Elsinore, they met with a strange kind of creature. A ghost appeared on the horizon for 2 successive nights, and then they also became puzzled by seeing the very close resemblance between Hamlet's father, King Senior Hamlet of Denmark, and this ghost. So therefore, Horatio was called upon by these guards, Marcellus and the other guy, because they thought that Horatio would be able to explain to them the mystery about this appearance of the ghost at the dead of night. And then when Horatio encountered the ghost, he was also puzzled by looking at the very similarity that ghost displayed, as he was wearing the armor that the actual king used to wear when he was joining a combat. So this combat dress, that is the military uniform with which the king, the ghost appears here, is so very much like the dead king that Horatio and Marcellus and the other guy, they thought it better to inform Hamlet about this. So when Hamlet appears on the night, it was the 4th night that Hamlet would meet the ghost, and then just at the dead of night, the ghost appears, and Hamlet by looking at the very close resemblance between his dead father and his this ghost, he at once pronounces that whether you are a good ghost or a bad ghost, but I am with you. Tell me why you have come here from your this place of burial. And then the ghost said that, Hamlet, the man who is now sitting in the throne, he is the very man who killed me. That is Claudius, his younger brother. And before now we know that Claudius also married Hamlet's mother Gertrude, which prompted Hamlet to produce his first soliloquy, beginning with that this solid flesh would be melt. Hamlet wanted to, in that soliloquy, Hamlet wanted to express his desire for ending his life. That is, his suicidal thoughts were predominant in that soliloquy, and we know that these thoughts were prompted by his disappointment at the marriage that had taken place between his mother and his uncle, the reigning king Claudius. So now, after that first onslaught on his sensibility, Hamlet is now encountered with the second onslaught, that this king has not only married his mother but has also killed his father. So therefore Claudius is a regicide, a king killer, but at the same time he is the reigning king, and on top of it he is the husband of his mother. How can Hamlet tolerate this? So his whole existence gets shattered, and with this shattered mind, then Hamlet comes across another setback in his life, because his fiancée, that is his soulmate Ophelia, was advised by her father and her brother Laertes. Her father is Polonius, that Ophelia should not hope to continue her love affair with Hamlet, because status-wise Hamlet belongs to the royal family, and since he is the Prince of Denmark, which means in future he would be the King of Denmark too. And on the other hand, Ophelia is the just daughter of a civil servant. There is no way that these two families can match in terms of wedding union. So Ophelia listened to her father and her brother, and therefore she gave up on Hamlet. She returned all the gifts and tokens and letters that Hamlet had so far been giving her. And so that was in a way the third kind of attack on Hamlet. So therefore the tragedy that is now taking place in Hamlet's mind is that he has to fulfill this mandate given to him by the ghost, that he must take revenge on Claudius. And then he also discovers, and T.S. Eliot had so profoundly made it clear, that he found himself to be feeling enraged against his mother, not as much as against his uncle. So therefore Hamlet was also finding it difficult to pursue this mandate given to him by the ghost, as his mindset was all against his mother, because he said very famously, "Frailty, thy name is woman." Now, when this war is going on in his mind, then another aspect of his mind is being exposed to us, that since he was a student at the University of Wittenberg, a place which was known for the liberal atmosphere, intellectual atmosphere that prevailed there, the very university where the Renaissance liberal ideas were propagated, the very university where once the founder of the Protestant Christian religion, Martin Luther, taught for some time, that very university therefore had made Hamlet's mind in such a way that he began questioning everything. So though initially he agreed with the ghost that he would take revenge at once, but as the days went by, Hamlet began to reconsider this idea, that how come that the ghost is an apparition. It is a supernatural being. What authority does he have to advise a mortal man like me to pursue homicide and regicide too, because Claudius is the reigning king? So therefore this dilemma starts in his mind, and he delays in taking his revenge. And at that point then another idea strikes him, because at that time at the palace of Elsinore a team of players came to perform to celebrate the recently established peace between Norway and Denmark. And we must also note that though Claudius is a king killer, he is a regicide and he has married his brother's wife, but at the same time, so far as the affairs of the state are concerned, Claudius seems to be well in control, so much so that he has found peace between these neighboring countries, Norway and Denmark. So in order to celebrate this, he wanted to hold a feast along with a celebration, and the celebration would take in the form of a theater, a play that will be staged. And Hamlet also, this is where we find that Hamlet's mind is full of multiplicities. That is, his mind is diversified and his interests go almost anywhere in the world. So therefore, when he meets the team of players, he becomes excited, and he urges the leading actor to recite some passages from the epic Homer's Iliad, exactly the passage where Hecuba, the queen of Priam, lamented the death of her husband in a very wild manner. And when the player king recited this speech from Hecuba, he did it so well that it also struck Hamlet with a new awareness that this player, who is only performing in the role of Hecuba, if he could bring tears to his eyes in this way, I am being a son of a murdered father, and then I am being also commanded to take revenge. Let alone tears, I have not been doing anything in a way of taking revenge. So this is called the spirit of emulation. Hamlet encounters a situation, he experiences a circumstance, and then his mind becomes full with emulation. He wants to emulate, he wants to defeat every counter approach regarding revenge. So anyway, then he asks the player king whether they would be able to perform an episode which he would be adding to their play. The players agreed, and Hamlet wrote some dozen or 16 lines, and these very lines which Hamlet contributes to this play within the play happen to narrate the story that the ghost told him about the circumstances in which he was poisoned by his younger brother Claudius. And then Hamlet says that if this performance by you, by the players, if this performance produces any reaction from the king, then he would be able to see that whatever the ghost had told him was true. So in order to prove the ghost's words, Hamlet arranges for this play within the play, and when the play was performed, Claudius reacted, and this very reaction was watched over by Hamlet and also by his friend Horatio. And after knowing this, Hamlet became certain that yes, this man actually is the killer of my father, and the ghost had told me the truth. So therefore there is no other hesitation in Hamlet's mind regarding taking revenge on Claudius. Now the question comes, can he take revenge on Claudius? Aesop very famously said that this very thing in Hamlet, that is to kill somebody, to commit an act of homicide, is not present in Hamlet's mindset. Constitutionally speaking, Aesop said that Hamlet is apathetic to this revenge action. This is one thing. And then when Hamlet's uncle becomes angry about this performance of the play within the play, and therefore he is deciding to send Hamlet away from Denmark. And at that point, Hamlet's mother calls him to meet her in her bedchamber. And when Hamlet is traveling from the palace to his mother's bedchamber, on the way he finds the king engaged at prayer. And he could hear the king's words. The king is saying in that prayer, Claudius, that though he is praying to God for mercy, but he cannot actually be shown mercy because he still possesses the benefits that he had acquired by doing the regicide. He still is holding the crown, he still is in control of the state, and on top of it, the queen, the earlier king's wife, is now his queen too. So with all these benefits that he had acquired by committing the first crime, therefore Claudius thinks that he cannot actually seek mercy from God. That is, he is not qualified to pray to God for mercy. At that point, Hamlet is just standing on the back of Claudius. He brings out his sword in order to thrust it into the back of Claudius, but then another thought occurs to him. This is very beautiful. And Hamlet says, if I kill Claudius now, I will be doing a kind of cheap job here, as if I am a hired killer and I am going to kill Claudius in order to take revenge. But he is praying to God. If I kill him now, his soul will travel not to heaven. His soul will travel to heaven, not to hell. But my mandate, my objective is to send his soul to the hell. So therefore Hamlet withdraws his sword. He keeps it back into the cover, and then he says that I am not going to kill him right now. Let another opportunity comes and I will surely do it. Shakespeare says that this is a very lame kind of excuse. It is not really that Hamlet is thinking about this serious consideration of having to see Claudius's soul travel to heaven rather than to hell. This is not really of greater priority to Hamlet. What is there essentially is inactive in Hamlet is the way to go forward to getting a king killed. That is simply impossible on the part of Hamlet. Anyway, this is Shakespeare's excuse, and then Hamlet goes to meet his mother, and at that point another development has to be taken note of. Polonius, the father of Laertes and Ophelia, has been a very active advisor to the king. Though he had not had any part in the conspiracy or in the killing of the previous king, but Polonius seems to be a very able, efficient advisor to the king, maybe for the wrong reasons, and he has told Claudius that the reason why Hamlet is acting insane is because Hamlet has failed in his love with Ophelia. So this is therefore a broken heart that is responsible for Hamlet's insanity. This is what Claudius is being informed by Polonius. But Claudius is far more intelligent than Polonius ever is, and Claudius thinks that there must be something more beneath this apparent disquiet in Hamlet. So therefore Polonius now engages himself to overhear whatever takes place between Hamlet and his mother, and he tells the king that if I can overhear their conversation, from their conversation, because it will be a very animated conversation between the son and the mother, I will be able to, of course, surely extract some kind of hint regarding or clue regarding Hamlet's present insane behavior. So he therefore decides to hide himself behind the curtain while the mother and the son will be having a conversation. But at that time Hamlet is very much agitated, and he produces a beautiful speech saying that I will speak dagger to her but use none. That is, Hamlet is now ready to give a dressing down to his mother. That is, he will be speaking to his mother very angrily, using his tongue like a sword, like a dagger. As Hamlet is talking to his mother in her bedchamber, then we have to look at another development of the plot. Polonius, who has been the chief advisor to King Claudius, did not have any part in the conspiracy in the killing of the previous king, but he is now almost overactive in trying to help the king come out of the present crisis that has developed between the king and Hamlet, and therefore he wants to spy on Hamlet in order to know what is there in the back of his mind bothering him. So when this conversation between the son and the mother would take place, he consults the king and seeks his permission to remain hidden behind the curtains when the conversation will take place. So accordingly, Polonius hides himself behind the curtains in the bedroom, and at that time Hamlet was very much agitated, and his reputation was that he has become insane. Thereby his mother was also a little scared of him, and as Hamlet was talking very excitedly in a loud voice, she thought that he would be physically attacking her. So she cried out, "Help, help!" And this automatically was taken up by Polonius, and he in his turn also echoes what the queen had said and said, "Help, help!" And by hearing this voice from behind the curtain, Hamlet thought it was the king hiding behind the curtain. So Hamlet just thrust his sword, directing the sword to the voice that he had heard from behind the curtains, and then he keeps the curtain apart and discovers that it was Polonius, not the king himself. And Hamlet said, "Oh, I thought you were the better of yourself." So this also therefore tells us that Hamlet, when he is prompted spontaneously, he is ready to kill anybody. But when he decides about killing somebody, then the delay starts. So here Polonius has been killed by Hamlet, and thereby, according to critic Harold Jenkins, another twist to the plot can be noticed. So far, until now, until Act 3, Scene 4, Hamlet has been the revenger who was given the mandate by the ghost of his father to take revenge on Claudius. And Claudius was the target of his revenge. But after Polonius gets killed by Hamlet, then the situation develops in this way that Polonius has a son like Laertes, in the form of Laertes, who is now similar to Hamlet and who is now seeking revenge on Hamlet because Hamlet is the killer of his father. So in this scene, therefore, Hamlet's status takes on a double dimension here. He is both a revenger who is seeking revenge on Claudius, and at the same time he has become the target of Laertes' revenge. Now initially Laertes didn't know that Hamlet was the killer of Polonius, but then Claudius reveals this fact to him, and thereby Claudius then brings Hamlet then Claudius then takes Laertes into confidence and directs his mind so that finally his aim to finish Hamlet would be achieved. Now, in the meantime, another dimension here has to be taken note of. When the king asks Hamlet about Polonius's dead body, Hamlet said that he is at supper, but not to eat, but to be eaten. This is a famous eschatological statement from Hamlet that shows that Hamlet realizes the truth about the nature of life, that ultimately death is the ultimate end to all lives, and thereby he also thinks about the democracy that death brings about in the difference between a king and a beggar. He says that your fat king and your lean beggar are now the food for the same convocation of worms. That is, finally, when we die, our dead body or our flesh becomes the food or dinner for the worms. So this is how Hamlet also develops his philosophy, that ultimately this pursuit of life on the world may be meaningless, because everybody is reduced down to the food objects of worms. And this therefore is here. And then, as we find, Laertes has now come back from France. He was a student in Paris. He now comes back hearing that his father has been killed, and he almost goes against King Claudius, grapples him by the collar, challenging him, saying that, give me my father. And Claudius tells him that, I am not the killer of your father, it is Hamlet who has done it, so let us do something about this. So the conspiracy is set, and Hamlet then is at once sent to England on the instruction of King Claudius, because he thought that Hamlet is no more a safe figure in the kingdom to stay. So when Hamlet has undertaken the voyage to the sea, he was accompanied by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Both are his childhood friends who were invited by the king in order to spy on Hamlet, to know really what is bothering Hamlet. So when the Hamlet would take the journey, he then sees that on the coast a big army of almost 20,000 soldiers is being led by Fortinbras, the Norwegian prince, and who is now advancing to Poland to recover a very barren patch of land on behalf of Norway. And then Hamlet said, if these 20,000 soldiers are going to sacrifice their lives for a piece of land which has no entity, no economic value, then why am I waiting? Why am I delaying? I know that my father is killed, my mother has been married, and my girlfriend is taken away from me, and still then I am waiting and waiting, not taking any revenge. So this very soliloquy, this is the seventh soliloquy which he produces. This very soliloquy also tells us that Hamlet is self-castigating himself for not taking enough action to materialize his revenge plan. And as it happens now, the king therefore sets the plan that, okay, before that Hamlet now is on the ship, and then the ship is suddenly attacked by a group of pirates, by a band of pirates. They attack the ship, they board on Hamlet's ship, and they find Hamlet. Before that, Hamlet has also done another thing. Hamlet was very much suspicious about his two friends. So when they were sleeping in the secret of the night, Hamlet enters their room and takes out the letter they were carrying from King Claudius, directed to the King of England. And reading that letter, Hamlet comes to know that Claudius has given direct instruction to the King of England that as soon as Hamlet lands on the coast of England, he should be executed. And Hamlet is a great letter writer. He then writes another letter, changing the names of Hamlet, substituting the name of Hamlet with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, that these two men are enemies to the state and they should be executed. And then he was also at that time wearing his father's ring, which he puts as a seal, and so that the letter becomes an official letter sent by the King of Denmark to the King of England. And after that, the incident with the pirates happens, and they then think that the pirates think that Hamlet seems to be a very precious, valuable prisoner. So they think that they should demand ransom at the cost of releasing Hamlet. So therefore they take him back to Denmark, which now has certain other points to take into consideration here, because Hamlet needs to be physically present in an area where Claudius is present. Otherwise he cannot take revenge on Claudius, number one. Number two is that if Hamlet doesn't come back, then the plot here is made in such a way that Hamlet really comes back. So here I want to say that Shakespeare here, by a master stroke, has blended the necessities of the plot and that of the story together, so that the story demands that Hamlet should be back in Denmark, and also plotline demands that Hamlet should be back in Denmark. So Hamlet thereby comes back to Denmark, and critics have maintained that it is a sea change. Sea change because the change has taken place on the sea, and sea change also suggests a big change, and the big change is here is that Hamlet so far has been an agnostic man. He was not really keeping much faith in a theological line. But now Hamlet thinks that this very enforced return, materialized by the pirates, so that he comes back to Denmark, must have been signaled by some superior power over which man don't have any control. So therefore Hamlet very famously says, there is a divinity that shapes our end. That is, divine interference must have taken place so that Hamlet can come back to Denmark, so that he can take revenge on Claudius. So thereby we have to say that so far Hamlet has been in an agnostic mood, or not non-believing mood, but now suddenly he almost reasserts his faith in Christianity, that there must be a signal that has come from God, so that he can finally take revenge on his uncle. And then he also says, which also falls in accordance with the theological thinking, that the fall of a sparrow, nothing can happen without God's ordain, that is God's order. Even in the fall of a sparrow, there is some heavenly touch or divine touch to it. So in this way Hamlet finally, let us say, explains his action on Claudius to have been backed by a theological interpretation, that is Christianity. Anyway, when Hamlet comes back to Denmark, he writes a letter to Horatio explaining to him everything, and then they meet, and as they were walking, they see that a pair of grave diggers is busy digging a grave. Then Hamlet is asking the grave digger, whose grave are they digging? The grave digger says that, okay, we are not very sure about who this person is, but she happens to be, or he happens to be, a member of the royal family, and we are not sure whether she has committed suicide or she died naturally. So this also produces a kind of little conflict in the play regarding the nature of Ophelia's death, because she died in circumstances which have been reported by Gertrude to the king, and probably Ophelia had committed suicide, but in the rendering of the queen, that point is not emphasized. The queen rather was alert, careful that the reporting of the death should be done in a manner so that Ophelia's death appears to be a natural death rather than a death by suicide. Anyway, as Hamlet was speaking, at that time the gravedigger was throwing up skulls skulls up there on the ground, and Hamlet picks one of them up and he says that, aha, this skulls happens to belong to my childhood caretaker Yorick. Oh my God, Yorick was such a fantastic guy, but today you see, Horatio, the skull has nothing, no eyes, no tongue, nothing, only this disgusting skull. So thereby it can be found in corroborating with the other idea that Polonius's dead body was being eaten up by the worms. Similarly here, death is the leveler. This Yorick, the very lively man in his childhood time, this Yorick has become only a skeleton, and the same fate happens to both Julius Caesar, Alexander, everybody. So this thinking is always running in parallel with Hamlet's so many other thoughts. And then Ophelia's body is brought down there, and then when Ophelia's body is lowered into the grave, Laertes, who has already come back, Laertes jumps into the grave, and Laertes is wild in lamenting over his dead sister. And then Hamlet, who has so far been wearing the disguise, a long robe, he suddenly jumps into the grave too, announcing for the first time, I, Hamlet the Dane, which officially is a recognition that he is the Prince of Denmark and going to be the next King of Denmark. Anyway, they took up a fight and they are taken apart, and then Hamlet says, Laertes, my love for Ophelia, my love for your sister is greater than the 40,000 brothers' loves combined. Sometimes in figures of speech classes, we use this reference, a statement by Hamlet, as an example of hyperbole. But here, how could Hamlet have said less? His love must be equal to, or more than equal to, that loves of 20,000 brothers combined. This happens anyway, and after that, Claudius now officially takes control of the situation to end Hamlet's life, and the conspiracy is again set. And then here, when this conversation regarding how to finish Hamlet, this conversation takes place between Claudius and Laertes. Laertes very softly suggests to Claudius that while he was studying in France, he became familiar with an apothecary who knew how to use fatal poison to kill people. And then he says, okay, when the fencing will take place, I will rub this poison on my sword. So here the point is that if Laertes has to be found out as an accomplice in the murderous plot against Hamlet, this is the reference that Laertes suggested this rubbing of the poison on the sword, and by which he also becomes a party to the killing mission. And then Claudius says, and I will keep the sword which Hamlet will use bent. And the convention of a duel at that time was that the swords must be bent at the point so that the opponent is not grievously hurt. And then another point is that Laertes can be held responsible for the conspiracy against Hamlet's life here, because it was he who suggested to Claudius to rub poison on the sword which he will use. This poison he actually collected while he was in France, living as a student. And then Claudius, as a backup support, said that, okay, if you fail to kill Hamlet with your sword, then I will keep this wine preserved for him with poison mixed in it, so that I will offer him this drink, and by drinking this wine, Hamlet will die. Anyway, the fight starts. Round 1 goes off well, round 2 also goes off well, but in round 2, Laertes gives a blow to Hamlet with his sword, by which Hamlet is now infected with the poison the sword was rubbed with. which means Hamlet will die soon. But at that point, as they reach a heated point, both the swords fall on the ground and they pick up, but they pick up the wrong ones. That is, Hamlet picks up Laertes' sword and Laertes picks up Hamlet's sword, which means Hamlet is now carrying the sword with the poison, and with this he hits Laertes, and Laertes has also received the poisonous wound, which will then also activate his death. And at that point, Queen Gertrude, finding Hamlet very tired, she wants to offer the drink to Hamlet, but Hamlet resists her request by saying that, "Mother, I am not yet tired, let me finish this bout and then I will drink." Then Gertrude says, "Okay, I will drink because I am tired." Claudius, sitting beside her, tries to desist her from drinking this wine, but Gertrude goes ahead and immediately she falls dead because of the poisonous effect of the wine. And when she dies, Hamlet, for the first time in the whole play, takes control of the situation. He commands all the doors to be shut and to find out the murderer. And at this point, Laertes comes to his rescue by pointing his finger to Claudius, who was sitting in the throne, saying that the murderer is here, the king himself. And this prompts Hamlet to go into his final revenge action. He thrusts the sword, the poisonous sword, into Laertes' chest, and then, as if it is not enough, he then takes up the wine bowl and pours the wine through Claudius's throat to ensure his death. Now, the play began with a suggestion of the poison that was poured into the ear holes of Hamlet Senior by Claudius, and the play is now ending with the same poison being returned to Claudius. So the play in a way has made a circular movement from poison to poison. Here Hamlet has used both the sword and the wine with the poison mixed in it, and to finish Claudius's life. So in this way, Hamlet has therefore fulfilled his revenge command. And then there is a question here. The courtiers who are present here as spectators to watch the fencing bout, they didn't have any idea that the king, the previous king, was secretly poisoned by his younger brother, the present king Claudius. So when Hamlet was killing Claudius, they thought that Hamlet was committing an act of regicide. So they shouted out, "Treason, treason!" and which means they thought that Hamlet was killing Claudius, which was not approvable. And then after that, Horatio also wants to commit suicide because Hamlet is dying, and in absence of Hamlet, Horatio feels that his life is meaningless, so he wants to end his life, but Hamlet desists him from drinking that poisonous wine by saying that, "You see, you must live after me, you must remain behind, stay behind to tell my story." Hamlet's story needs to be told to clarify his situation, that he did not commit an act of regicide, but he merely took revenge for an earlier murder that took place before. And with this, the play ends, and Hamlet then says, "Everything is silence." And here, if we now see that though Hamlet has taken this revenge, but it was not a straightforward case for him. He hesitated, he procrastinated, he delayed, and we also mentioned French critic René Girard, who said that Hamlet was not a play for revenge, but a play against revenge. This probably is true to some extent, because if we think about the thought of the time, Shakespeare's great contemporary Francis Bacon wrote an essay called Of Revenge, which begins with the first line like this: "Revenge is a wild justice." revenge is a wild justice. That is, revenge in a modern society, in a civilized state, cannot be approved of, private revenge especially. But the play Hamlet is so sublime a play, so thoughtful, so beautifully diversified, and even though it was written under the aegis of Queen Elizabeth, who was a Protestant monarch, but we have to agree with Stephen Greenblatt, who said that so far as the ghost's portrayal is concerned, it might be seen that Hamlet was also secretly showing sympathy for his, not Hamlet, Shakespeare was showing secret sympathy for his father's Catholic ideas, which also included purgatory. Purgatory, this concept was rejected by Protestantism, but it was upheld by Catholicism. So this ghost coming from purgatory, therefore, according to Stephen Greenblatt, is very much a signal that Shakespeare was writing this play by trying to include all diversified faiths that would only clarify a mind like Hamlet, that it is, as A.C. Bradley has said, leaves us, it certainly leaves us with a sense of waste. Thank you very much for bearing with me, dear viewers. Our next lectures will be on the critical aspects of Hamlet, and then we will go for longer discussions on his other three great tragedies, Othello, King Lear and Macbeth. With this, I end my lecture today. Thank you once again. Bye bye. Take care.